Hello, and welcome to the South Coast Artists Index, where artists, performers, and writers, as well as curators, directors, and supporters, anyone with ties to the creative community, drops by to introduce themselves to you. We'll talk about their beginnings, their vision, their passion, and so much more. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com.
Hi, this is Ron Fortier once again with another episode of the In Focus podcast brought to you by the Artist Index and sponsored in part by our friends at Heavenly Spirits Imports. And today we have a guest who is going to tell us about a person that's very, very near and dear to my heart. And before we get rolling with that, I'll let our guests introduce themselves and tell us who this person is.
My name is Michael, and we are discussing today my great-grandfather, MAL C. Oliveira. His name was Manuel, but he always went by Mal when he signed things. So it'll be interesting. It's good to keep his memory alive.
Exactly. He was on Arch Street, a couple of doors down from my other instructor, who was Lionel Soares. I probably had to be the worst student he ever had. But I don't even remember how I was introduced to your great-grandfather, but I do remember the studio was upstairs. The smell of oil paint was always present. And he was a very even-tempered, very hard to describe that personality, nonplussed, I guess.
Yeah.
And to this day, whenever I see a velvet painting and I hear people laughing at it, velvet painting, blah, how kitschy. And it's like, you've never really seen real velvet painting. The first time I've ever saw it was your great-grandfather. He would have these little 5x7 maybe size paintings of strawberries and oranges, and they were absolutely exquisite. Absolutely exquisite. And the other thing that was amazing is how delicate the work was and the size of this man's hands. I mean, his thumb alone was the size of somebody's fist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He had masonry hands.
Yeah. I mean, I still remember. I still remember him fondly. When I'm looking at the landscape, or I'm looking at other people's landscape paintings, and there's just so many things that he had this incredible sensibility. Like, you always say, you fuzz out the edges of the painting because your eyes only really see the center. It's like a big oval. And then he would, especially if I'm looking out at the water and not even thinking about painting, he would always say, when the sea is angry, it's dark and the sky is light. He says, when the sky is dark, the sea is light. It's always that difference. And then he said, when you look real careful at the horizon line where the ocean meets the sky, he says, you'll see this very, very faint, bright line running across. He says, that's the atmosphere. And it was just, amazing. It was just absolutely amazing. Tell us about him, because I could reminisce, forever about him.
Well, I mean, I was born in 81, so I caught the tail end years, but he was still, still going into his 90s when he was painting. And he passed away in 2003. But, I could close my eyes and, go into a studio. I get a heavy mist of oil, heavy mist of like a turpentine kind of smell. And then you could walk through and there's probably about 100 stacks of National Geographic magazines. And there's a projector with a bunch of slides that he took. And then you would, you can take a right and you have this massive fireplace with all these eclectic, like big things he would find. He would like massive, like a lobster crab. It was huge.
Mhm.
And then, but if you just went straight and you take a left and you go up into a studio, it was like pretty. It was incredible because he had like a million things up there
Mhm.
and a million things going at once. But he always had a massive, massive canvas, a little canvas, a smaller canvas, and and then he had this massive his palette board where he had all his paints, all mixes and stuff like that. And they were, you know, it wasn't just like a little board. I mean, it was a full size. It was probably like 16 by 16 with all different paints on there. And then he would just have all these different things going, and jazz music was always playing. He would always be playing jazz music, and he didn't, for what he did later in his life too, his vision wasn't that great, and he always had those huge bifocals, and I would always like remember seeing them. He'd look up at me like this, and his eyes would be like, I magnified times 100. He'd be looking
Mhm.
at me, telling me not to touch things. And then after a while, then he started teaching me things, and started teaching me, lessons of what to paint and like how houses were and how shadows were. I remember it was probably 7 maybe, and I had a coloring book that I got at the Whaling Museum,
Mhm.
and I started coloring it in, and then he was like, "Oh no, that's wrong," and he started like taking all the crayons and making shadows of all different colors. So like, I guess I was doing shadows with probably a dark color, and everything else was light. But he was like taking like, orange, red, blue, like all these different colors and mixing them together and going, is like, yeah, he's like, the shadows aren't this color. Shadows are all representations of all the colors and this and that. Like, so, like little things that I see. And then as I'm older, I don't paint like him, but I take photos. And if I go to edit things, like just little things you picked up, I've learned from him about shadows, especially horizons. When you look, and I'm looking, you said through a lens. When I look through a lens, you could see, even through a lens, you get kind of a barrel distortion. You get a little
Mhm.
distortion. Nowadays with Photoshop, you can fix it. You can take that barrel out. But I kind of like that because it's, like you said, your natural eye isn't going to
Mhm.
be perfect. It's not going to be great. And but the best way to describe him was a Renaissance man. He was a Renaissance man. The guy did everything. He built his own studio, built his own house, and he liked jazz. He was in his own band. He built his own bass. Like everything he was a gardener, an avid dancer. I mean, anything that he did to like, not to an extreme, but he just covered it all.
Yeah.
So I would best describe him as like, especially his cooking, just everything. He was he was a Renaissance man. He was a man that was a good at any task that he had at hand.
Yeah.
And I just take that today, and as I get older, I realize I kind of want to be more like my grandfather. I kind of want to be more like that guy who's more diverse in different things and not just stuck. Or I just only do this, or I just do that. Like, I kind of want to branch out like he did. I grew up watching him do everything. He literally did everything.
Mhm.
There was nothing that he did not do. If you needed something, uh, he probably had it in his garden. If you needed anything. He probably had it in his workshop downstairs. The guy did, he worked with wood too. I mean, it was pretty incredible what they had to do back when there wasn't modern things like today. You couldn't order stuff on Amazon. You had to make it yourself or
Mhm.
go to a specialty person. But yeah, I would think he would be a Renaissance man today.
Well, let's roll it back. Now, where was he born? Where did he come from?
He was, from what I understand, he was born in Pico in the Azores. Um, it was 1908. I'm pretty sure he came over in 1912. So he came over with his mother and his father and the brother, Frank,
Mhm.
from what I understand. And I'm not sure when his mom passed. I'm not sure any of that stuff, but he did come over, and I'm pretty sure in 1912, and he was in Dartmouth,
Mhm.
Mass, and that's where he stayed most of his life too.
Right. His education, his and becoming an artist. I mean, his skill set seemed to be such of a man who had some formal training.
He was self-taught.
It's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
he,
I mean, just
he was
again,
self-taught. Yeah,
his ability to observe things
yeah.
was phenomenal.
like in Horizon, like, yeah, you go look at the water and you're going to see reflections and you're going to look. And I guess maybe that's why people got a concept that the world is flat. Because when you look and you get a good day, there's no fog and you got clear sight, you see that line go across. It's almost like
Yeah.
someone slipped a glass under there to do a little reflection,
Yeah.
you know, and you can't, that's how your eyes perceive it. And
Yeah.
it's pretty, he didn't have, I can tell you, he didn't have the best vision too. So it's kind of incredible, all the stuff that he did.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing too is like he would say, okay, if you really want to learn how to paint, he says you go outside and paint. You and they didn't use the term plein air back then. You go outside and paint. He says because within 2 minutes you realize that whatever you have in your canvas, no matter how good it is already completely different from what you were looking at. He says, and it can frustrate you. So you got to work very, very fast, and you have to be very, very aware what's going on, and you almost have to anticipate changes. Like the sun's going to move across the sky and so shadows are going to move. And again, it's just amazing that he had, no, theoretically, no formal education whatsoever. And he was self-taught. Now, he worked at Concordia. I believe it's Concordia Boat or Concordia Boat, because they were known for the Concordia yawl, right?
Yeah, and it was probably the boatyard being there,
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm assuming, before it all switched over.
Before it went up to where the dairy, the Gulf Hill Dairy used to be. Yeah. Yeah. Now he's known. I know the Whaling Museum has a couple of his pieces. I've heard some rumor that there is a possibility of, or they've been talking about doing an exhibit of either just his work or maybe a lot of the Luso-American artists, which would be kind of cool because there's Francisco Raposa, another one of my instructors. There was Louis Sylvia, who was, my God, talk about prolific. He had a pattern done. I mean, he was very, he sold a lot of work. It'd be like whale ship coming into harbor and left, whale ship coming into harbor center, whale ship coming into harbor right, whale ship coming into harbor left, sunset, whale ship coming into harbor center, sunset. It was like the same themes. Like it was absolutely amazing, and so it was those, it was Mal, Francisco, Louis Sylvia. There were a couple more, but I'm just losing that. Any newspaper articles on him? Any that kind of documentation?
I do. I found a lot of stuff on YouTube. Not YouTube, on Google, and I found a lot of things. I also found a lot of stuff that sold, like his Scrimshaw. There's paintings on there that have sold. It's still very tough because I put a lot of stuff out there on Facebook. Say, hey, anybody know my great grandfather? If you have any works, and some people did respond, but they weren't willing to part with it. But I think I've gone to understand that maybe someone passed the kids or the parents, the sons, daughters came in and said, "What's this?" and probably threw it away or did something. It's just a shame because it really is tough to find things. And it was a couple of antique stores in New Bedford that has stuff like, Mal, it's gone, and it's like. It goes and it comes and it goes very quickly, which is it's a bummer because I'm trying to collect some things. I do have some stuff of his, and I'm not sure if it really is, but I'm pretty sure because this my Aunt Pat, which is his daughter, told me that this was your grandfather's last painting. He never finished it, and I have it.
Wow.
So it's a landscape of like the ships. It's like a ghost ship. It's a night scene. It's a rough sea, and then all of a sudden you get this nice break of light coming through, and there's a ship right underneath the light, and it's not finished. It's just a rough outline. He just started to do it, but you can still see where the mast is and the sails, and it was just drawn in the pen that he had or a light. It was just never finished. So, but it's massive. It's like 2 by 3 feet, and it's just kind of cool to see the way they work. I have another work of him. I think it's dated 1971 or 74. It's reflections in some sort of a pond, or it could have been paint air. It could have been somewhere, but it was just reflections in the water. I do have a couple of his. So he not only did he do painting, so he did gesso, acrylic, watercolor, scrimshaw, jewelry, ceramics, pottery. He did even the wooden structures. He would get detailed, and in the boats in Concord, he would paint all the stuff on the bows and all
Sternboards and
the other
everything.
stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
And then so he also did clocks, and I actually have clocks of his that were so it has like the whaler with a harpoon,
Right. Right.
and then he also did one with like a dog track, and it was called artistic or artistry clock. I think it's called artistic clocks, and that was his thing. You know, that was him.
Yeah.
And so I have those, but they're unfinished. They just need the actual clock,
the hands and
and all that to finish it. So it's actually just the plate. So I got a couple of those.
Right.
I actually have a belt buckle that's scrimshaw that's made in pure silver, and then he did it. And you know,
Did he sleep?
I know, yeah. But I guess so. You know, he passed away at 95. You get a good collection of things, and back then, you know, if you wanted to do something, you just I guess you had to do it, you know, and wanted to be involved in something. Whereas nowadays is you know, you could buy something already partially done and then go ahead and finish it. But like that, you know, you got to keep yourself. Back then, there's no television as much as it was like today. There's no things to keep you. You had to keep yourself occupied.
We had three stations. We had pretty much three stations, 6, 10, 12. And then we had I never can remember, UHF for VHF. It was like another band. And most of those were coming in from Boston. And yeah, that was I must have taken lessons with him just around 69, 70, 71. And because of him, between him and Francisco Raposa, they helped prepare my portfolio, which, you know, got me into UMass. Herb Cummings, you know, I looked at my portfolio, and, you know, I've mentioned this before in the show. He looked at it and he's like, yep. I'm like, you know, because you had to, there was a portfolio back then. You had to do certain things, mechanical things, a landscape, something from your imagination, the human figure, that kind of thing. And he just went, yep. And I'm thinking to myself, oh crap, I did all this work, and like, yep. Yeah, boy. Yeah. He's looking at me. He's like, "So what the hell are you standing there for? Get your ass down in missions. You're in." And you know, I never had a chance to go back and thank him for that. You know, but so what side of the family is he? Your dad's or your mom's side?
Mother's side, yeah.
Your mother's side.
My great grandfather, yeah.
Okay, so your grandfather, did he take after his dad, or did he live in the shadow of all of that industry?
Yeah. No, but it was, you know what it was? It was his children, because he had two daughters. So it was Pat and Rita. I'm not sure if my grandmother Rita was an artist, because I never really, she died in her 40s. You know, she passed, she had cancer. And, but you know, my Aunt Pat's still alive, and she paints. She does good too. So, and then all my uncles paint incredibly good too. And it's weird, because I think it almost like skips generations, you know, and then like my kids are kind of good, and my you know, my wife's side, her grandmother and uncle are really good artists. So it's kind of weird to see how just naturally I'm not saying me, but definitely my daughter picks up certain things. Yeah. So yeah, it's kind of weird. Some people just don't do it, and then some people just always clicked with it and always did it, you know. But I mean,
like a combination of genetics and exposure.
Yeah, I think it's good,
just growing up around it. It becomes natural. It's like,
hard to live in a shadow. You know, you don't want to live into a shadow of someone, you know, too. So I think it's good to just be who you are, and but like you could just I always take a look back and see what some of the things he did. And it's tough, because I'd love to see all his work. And obviously it wasn't cataloged like today. Today, everything, you know, when I do digital photos, I mean, I'm cataloged. Like I have gigs, terabytes of stuff, you know, just, you know, thousands and thousands of stuff that's, if anything would ever happen, it's there. You know, anybody can access that. Where it was him, it was like, it's all in my memory, you know, like, and he did a lot of whaling. I'm not going to say that whaling was most of what he did, because that's the problem. He did whaling, he did landscapes, he did commercial work.
It's
He
still
worked for
life.
Hallmark cards. He did cards for Hallmark. He also worked for is it Pearpoint Glass?
Pierpoint glass, yeah.
Yeah,
In
he
fact,
worked
I
for
think he
them too.
spoke. Now that you mentioned, I think he mentioned something about doing a lampshade. Not the fabric shade, but the painting
Glass.
on the glass, like bisque
Yeah,
glass or whatever it's called. Yeah.
yeah. So, and he did so many things that it's like he also did abstract art. He also did impressionism, which is my favorite. I like impressionism the
Mhm.
best because, you know, he was always working on different things at different times where it's like trying to find a catalog of his. Like he was one time where he was into a lot of Chinese antique, like vases and vases, whatever you want to call it. So he did a
Well,
lot of like
Groucho Marx, I
really
think
intricate.
once Groucho Marx once said, if I think it was Groucho Marx, if it's $3 and under, it's a vase. If it's over $3, it's a vase.
Yeah. Well, did a lot of vases. So, you know, and like, in his studio, like I said, you smelled that turpentine and oil. That's all you
Yeah.
smelled. And it was a heavy smell. And it was just, but then in his house, he had a whole room dedicated to like all his stuff. So you'd walk in and there was hundreds of pieces of like, ceramics that he did. And not just like, some of them were like 3 feet and completely painted. Nothing was missed. Like, everything, some of them had gold leaf in there, inlays, and this, the scrimshaw that he did. I know he did a whole jaw of the whale jaw. So it was one side of a whale jaw. He did all the ships that were part of that time period
Yeah.
on the jawbone. He did the jewelry pieces where he would do the scrimshaw and then lay him in the buckles or lay him in a ring or on the back then there was the Nantucket baskets.
Yeah.
So
Right. They
have
have
like
like
he was
it's on the top. Yeah. Yeah.
yep. So he would do the inscription or he would do like a design or something like that. Well,
Mhm.
it's just cool because even the clocks that I have of his, you know, it's hard to pinpoint everything that he did. He did like historical pieces. I have let's call it like the stowboat, the whale, and it might be ivory. It's definitely white and it's all carved. And then he did a little paint, picture, and it's on an oval plaque. And the paintings that he did, it was just like so that painting, a couple paintings that I have was just kind of incredible because he did one in the 70s. So 70s. So he was getting to his 60s then, and I don't know, maybe when people get older, their expression kind of becomes easier, because, the way he put the paint on there you could see it. It's a nice thick blob
Mhm.
there, but it's there. And it's just like it's a reflection in water. Just how he does it. It's very quick, leaves it, doesn't fine tune it, doesn't do nothing, goes on to the next one and doesn't, it's just, so I see things that I'm trying to like visualize and catalog myself of stuff that he's done. So, maybe if I see something like I'm always like, if I'm looking into like real estate and houses around here and stuff like that, I always sometimes look at like even like when they take photos and sometimes if they see I look on the walls. Sometimes I'll call the realtors and say, "Hey, can you just check to make sure what that was in there?" And
Mhm.
hasn't come up yet, but it's something to see. I noticed that from his earlier works that I've seen, like Scrimshaw that he did, was very tight, very precise. And then I have a couple of his works when he was older, where it was just, I don't know, it was a mix of like impressionism and fine art. It was just, but it all worked. It's like almost
It was
like he
like
just didn't have to deal, like he just put it on and that was it.
it was short. It was like a shorthand. It was a practice. It was a practiced hand.
Yeah,
Where he just it was second nature. There's
but
no
it was
thinking.
very precise,
Yeah.
very precise.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be great to be able to catalog all the stuff that is available. I think I'm just thinking now. A couple of years ago, I used to have people send me images of work, and would ask me either is it your work or is it this person's work in your neighborhood. I mean, these people were from all over the country. I haven't had one in a while, but one of them I said, it, I'm pretty certain this is Mal Oliveira, but I have no idea how, if he's still alive, you know, if anything of his exists, if there's any record of him, so that you could, you know, at least get the provenance on this thing. But it was a smaller piece of work. It was probably, you know, 8 by 10.
Yep.
And um, he did have a distinct style, and his
Yeah.
style was so different from Luis Silvia and Fernando Raposa, Francisco Raposa. Francisco Raposa was actually, I think watercolors he was a virtuoso when it came down to the watercolors. I'm hoping that this podcast will stimulate people out there to contact you.
You know, someone that did contact me. He said he was a student, I guess, of my grandfather. He had some
Mhm.
work. He didn't, he didn't want to part with it, but I know he has some.
But at least you could photograph it.
Personally, I don't know him, but his name is Buddy Sylvia.
Buddy Sylvia. Why is that ringing a bell?
Yeah.
Is
So,
he my
you know,
age?
I'm not sure. I'm not. He's older. I'm not sure exactly his age, but I mean, if he's a Sylvia, he might be related. You know, so that's the reason
yeah.
why, you know, it all coincides. But you know, I didn't really pursue anything. You know, who knows? Maybe he'll contact me later. But you know, yeah, trying to catalog his stuff and trying to find his things, it's tough. I mean, he has work all the way out to San Diego, and I know. So I just came into contact probably about 3 months ago. His 35 millimeter slides that he had. So
Those are horrible. The ectochromes.
yeah, yeah. But you know, he traveled all over. So now, like, I see some of those slides, and I could see some of his paintings because I remember seeing like Rockport.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that famous
was it motif number one? The red fish house there.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And like, you know, his pictures, stuff over there, and he traveled with my grandmother. But I have photos from got to be from 40s through 60s. So, I mean, places probably aren't even there yet. I mean, they're gone. They're probably not even around anymore.
Yeah.
So it's hard for me to place. And the lighthouses might be a little bit easier for me to find. I've been trying to do that on the lighthouses. But, you know, even there's like old, so at the Concordia boatyard now where, you know, where the sail loft was over there, like that. And back in the day, you know, that was never kind of there. It was like kind of just like the water was there. So you know, it's a slide of a boat that I'm assuming he worked on because it's up, you know, and then in the yard, and then there's another picture of it inside the water being docked, you know,
right.
You know, so you know, there's some things I'm piecing together. There's an old shot of the Payneham Bridge, so it's probably I would say 50s or 60s. It's just really cool because I got some shots of the Astoria Hotel in New York and stuff like that in the 50s. And he wrote on there, like, you know, in the 50s New York, and you could see the cars and stuff like that. So he did travel, and he did travel. So I'm thinking like New Hampshire, Vermont, there might be Maine in there, obviously. New York he went to, and a couple places. But some going through those slides, I remember some of those things that he painted. You know, he did a lot of work in New Hampshire and Vermont too. You know, he loved those bridges. You know, with the
the covered bridges.
Yeah. You know, got a lot of those.
Yeah, his eye was always, it never stood still. You mentioned San Diego because it's kind of interesting. A lot of people, you know, may know, and some people may not know, but there's a pretty large Portuguese community there. I think it's Our Lady of Fatima. Might be the church, because I know when my granddaughter went out there for the Navy, and she's like, "Wow, I can't believe I had malasadas today." I'm in California. She says, "Go figure, right?" And I said, "Well, they have a couple of festivals. One of them actually is Fall River Days. There's a lot of transplants from Fall River out there."
Wow.
And there's actually I don't know what it is, but it's called Portuguese Bend. I don't know if it's a road or an area, you know, or whatever. So it is possible that, you know, his work made it out there.
Yeah.
What would you, I mean, would you like to see the Whaling Museum grab up a lot of work? Because don't forget, I mean, that's like a big piggy bank, a big safety net for a lot of people of his generation that unfortunately, the relatives, people don't have the space, they don't have the
Yeah.
inclination to save them.
I've heard that some of his work was in City Hall in New Bedford.
Mhm.
That's just what I've heard. And I'm not sure what the old bank used to be, but now it's Bay Coast Bank. The old bank, it had the loft and the huge money, the vault. It's on I think it's on Purchase Street and William Street.
Oh, it was there's the bank and trust. It was the Mercantile, I think, the Mercantile
Yeah.
Bank.
So he did some paintings for them. He was
Yep.
commissioned, and he had some paintings there. So it is, it's trying to find stuff. I've seen stuff of Louis Sylvia and stuff like that around, but trying to find stuff for my great grandfather was really hard, which is boggles my mind because he has over 1,500 oil paintings alone, and
Wow.
he's done, that's just oil paintings, and he's done so many other things that it's like I'm not sure how, or how. It's crazy. This is Scrimshaw alone. He had hundreds of pieces, if not thousands, of
Mhm.
Scrimshaw stuff that he's done over the years. Uh, and I can remember seeing some things when I was a child, and then in my teenage years, and I still remember it. But it's almost like I know my uncle. Thankfully, he did have and has now a lot of his work, and I'm thankful of that. So I haven't had a chance to see him. I know he has it, and we just haven't had a chance just to, especially with COVID, and just get together
Right,
and,
right.
and take a look at everything. But I've seen some work that my uncle does have a good amount of my grandfather's work. But the problem is, like, I know my uncle has a good amount, but that doesn't even touch or scratch the surface of what he did.
Yeah.
So it's like, it's almost like a roulette wheel. I found maybe about 6 or 7 months ago, someone had the MAL Oliveira on eBay,
Mhm.
and it was the Portugal boat. I guess
Mhm.
going out with a lobster boat. And then I told my uncle, so he went and he picked it up. So I'm trying to, if I do see a piece too, if I don't get it, I try to tell him to get it and he picks it up.
Mhm.
Um, he does have a lot of the work, but trying to find it and trying to calculate and trying to catalog things is, even for myself, it's been difficult, especially nowadays with technology. I figure, like, I put his name in and a bunch of stuff would pop up, and stuff pops up, but it's either already been sold, or it's already gone. It's not something that's cataloged where you can come see it, and then there's the works of it. So
Right. He's
um,
he's in a secondary market now. Um, has he shown up in auction houses?
yeah, he's showing up in the Christie's in Worth Point. Christie's, he got a couple tooth whale teeth, and they were I'm not sure what boat, but he inscribed stuff on it. He did
Mhm.
scrimshaw on the whale tooth. There was two of them, and they sold for, I think they were together. The lot sold for 15,000 for two pieces. So I mean, and they had a whole write up about him, so they know what he was and what he did. So that blew me away. That I know scrimshaw's expensive, but like the detail that even they had on him, and they probably researched on him and found out. And it's like, it was pretty cool to see.
Yeah. Yeah, they
He
have
has some
departments.
recognition.
Yeah, they have a department in a lot of those places, part of the organization that's all they do is research. Um, yeah, I think from a little I know, is what you need is to create what they call a catalog raisonné. And what a catalog raisonné is, where was he was born, how, the family immigrated to the United States, his occupations, he was here, there, and, during these time frames. And then you start putting his work in, and not only just photographing the front, but, photographing the back, uh, the signatures, and sometimes the backs reveal a lot. Like if the work is passed through several hands or what was in a gallery, they'll have stickers on it and other markings, that'll help. And what that does is that when once you establish that catalog raisonné, now an appraiser, a certified appraiser, now has something to go to. And generally, it helps increase the value of the work because now they know absolutely positively for sure this is an authentic MAL Oliveira because of the following whatever points they use. So
Yeah.
a piece that you think, hey, that's nice for $250 could be, wow, that's a beautiful little MAL Oliveira, $2,500. You know, all of a sudden it's gone up because they can put their finger on him, you know, exactly, you know.
So my uncle actually has his palette board, the oil palette board
Yeah,
that he used with all the dried up paint on it.
the palette, yeah,
He
yeah.
has it. Yeah, he has it. It's pretty cool. And I saw that, and I saw a couple. And I when I was talking to my uncle, he actually, I didn't know this, but my Mal, he did like a lot of the state seals, like especially for like Dartmouth and all the police seals. Like when you see the insignia, the seal.
Did he
Yeah.
do the for the stamps?
Yes,
You know,
the
when you
metal
would get
plates.
a legal piece of
Yeah,
paperwork, they would, yeah, like the notary stamp. Yeah.
yeah. He actually designed the seal, designed it. Like with you know, like if he had the deer or something like that. Like
Right,
my
right,
uncle
right,
said, he had a couple of those plates
right.
still from the original. So you know, it's amazing. He did a lot throughout the state, not just like this area, but he did a lot of the seals.
You know, somebody who might be able to help you. I don't even know if they're still in business, but my dad, when he bought the property on Luke Street, it was 27 Luke Street. It was Costa's Bookbindery. That was the building that was there. And Costa used to bind all of the annual reports, and you know, people were still putting, you know, vital records, birth, death, and marriages in by hand in these books, and they would rebind them, and you know, they put in new covers and all that other stuff. There's a possibility they moved to a Acushnet, and at one time they were like, I think the only binders, or the only bindery around. They, who know? It may have passed down, and they may have some information for you.
Yeah,
You
I'll
know?
have to find out. I do have a couple. He gave me a couple of his books too, and he had his seal in there, says Mal Oliveira. So, you know, I would even when I go see a yard sale, so I was trying to hunt for them, and I would try to see if I found one of his books because everything he had a whole library of books, and he had
Mhm.
his own seal that he put on it, property of Mal C. Oliveira or library and stuff. So, you know, it it's just I can't believe how tough it is, though. It really is. It's like a needle in a haystack trying to find his work, and he did so many of it. I just think it, you know, it just went all over the country. Then now it's tough.
Yeah.
And then, like, you know, my uncle was saying too, like, well, you think about it, you know, someone passes and they see this painting, they might not know who or what it was, and they said, "Oh, throw it away or just get rid of it." He goes, that's just what happens. And it's true, you know.
Yeah.
Um, I do know that when he signed something, it was, you know, the right or left corner, but it was mostly on the right corner. When you would do Mal, the L was the same length from top to bottom. So
Hmm.
that was an easy way to see if it was his or not, you know. So we had
Hmm.
that little thing where the L's were, you know, one line was shorter than the other. It was both the same length.
Right. Right. Almost like copper to square kind of thing.
Yeah,
Even
pretty
that,
much.
even that is a short end. But yeah, I do remember that. Um, uh, so he came over when he was 8 years old, and he obviously was educated here. So they came to Dartmouth, and he grew up in Dartmouth. I mean, pretty much stayed there for all of his life, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So he was educated in the school system here. And
yes,
the other thing is he had no trace of an accent that I could detect. I mean, I grew up
no,
Portuguese, you know.
yeah,
Um, uh, and I remember that his mustache, that clipped
yeah.
mustache. He was
He
actually
kind of
yeah,
he was a handsome guy.
he was a very distinguished. In fact, if you put him in like um, British tweeds and stuff like that, he would like just fit the part. I mean, he
Yeah,
looked like that, you know. Um, the the these days, um, one way to memorialize somebody is online. create a website for him. So say you did that, what would you hope to get out of it besides just keeping his memory alive?
I mean, just the fact to try to get that, find anything or find something, or even a memory for myself if I've seen that painting before, just to know that it's out there and still available, and let people understand that, what he did for the area when it came in terms of painting, because he did murals all over, he did other things all over, and it's called the Whaling City stuff that he did for the whaling and stuff. Like, it was just so highly collectible. Just to see that stuff again would be pretty cool. Just to see his work and how he things transferred over the years, and how he would depict a certain scene, and then he would do a landscape that was just like total opposite of the spectrum. Like, it's just kind of like, it'd be cool just to see like where he traveled, what he did, collect all those things. And I mean, I grew up with it, so it was a little bit different for me. So it's like, he was like a Renaissance man to me. So trying to see all that come together, and you can't pinpoint him. You can't, he just did everything, which was really cool too. He didn't stop. And I would like to see just his memory, put out there and known, because I think he does deserve it, because he's done so much work. He did a lot of things that, even into this area, like some people took certain things, and you could pick out that person. You already know like what they did, and you're like, yes, he did that. Oh, yes, that's so and so's painting. But when it came to a MAL OLIVEIRA painting, it was like you said, like the velvet or whatever, all these different things. He did so many different things that it became like, is it MAL OLIVEIRA? Like, you have to really look at the signature and check. You have to be sure, because he did so many different things that.
I guess his style was having no style. Because I mean, I remember the still lifes, not just the ones on velvet. Because I remember looking at those strawberries, you could see the
light
holes where
gleaming.
the seeds are. Yeah,
Yeah,
the gleam on them. And he did citrus as well. Lemons and oranges, and you could see the texture of the skin. They were incredible. And then his more marine kind of paintings were totally different in style. Wow. Did he have any siblings?
Yeah, he did. Frank, from that's what I know about Uncle Frank, and he was actually tall. He was a lot taller. I think he was like 6 feet, and my grandfather was probably, I don't know, 4'11" or something, or like, he was a short,
probably 5'2" maybe, but he probably shrank. Yeah.
And but he had his hair up until his last days, and he was a broad guy, and he had he was like a little looked like a little bodybuilder. His thumbs, like you said, he had huge hands. He was like he almost had like the masonry hands, and here he is with these paintbrushes, and doing all these different things. And it's pretty, like you said, with the detail on the strawberry. I mean, there was so many still lifes that I seen. Like one with like there was glasses, and there was a book, and then maybe like a
Bell,
candle.
book, and candle. He had a whole bunch of those. Bell, book, and candle. That's right.
Yeah. But the glasses, the reflection, I mean, it was so real. It's almost like I'm jealous of the guy, because how could you capture something like that? Like, how do you do that? Like, it's complete jealousy, because nowadays, I guess you can, put something on. For realism, they would blow it up on the wall, and then they would paint on the realism. I mean, back then, not that he didn't do that, maybe, but some of his techniques that he used was just like, he just left you in awe, and like, you're just jealous over it. Like, how did you make that like look so realistic? Like you're saying about the glasses and stuff. I remember always looking at the glasses and the candle, and like, it always gleamed. It always was like, it was clean and just so real looking.
And even the the writing, the printing on the book. I
Yeah,
mean, you know, you really have to look. I mean, obviously, you know, it's Trump toy. You know, it's
yeah,
well, Trump toy is probably not the right term. It fooled you enough, so you know you'd have to get real close and you'd see it was just, you know, markings. But my God, from the distance, he was really, if I now my memories are starting to come. He was really taken by a couple of the French still life painters. I think Chardin was one of them. And he used to just like marvel at it. He'd say, "Look at that glass! Look at that
yeah,
glass!" Okay, and he'd have this, you know, the Chardin would have this glass, and you know, you see the thin glass, and it's like he was just like totally marvel. And the other thing too is he was a guy. I mean, his demeanor that I remember, he wasn't like a buzzing around kind of a guy, like a nervous kind of character. He
yeah,
was very chill.
yeah. But he had multiple things going at once,
Yeah,
and he found a way just to cohesively push together. And it's weird, but that's kind of how I am today. You know, like as doing photography, it's like people
oh yeah, I mean, talk about
they ask me to
let's
do
talk about
something.
photography. My God, I mean, I know a lot of photographers who do a lot of things. I mean, you know, everybody's got to do the wedding stuff at one point, but and I was looking at some of your images when I was doing another podcast post for somebody else, and I was searching for their pictures, and I got to your section. It was like, oh my God, you
Yeah,
know, uh, it's not just prolific. It's, you know, a lot of photographers are like, well, do you do blah? No, I only do studio work.
yeah.
It's like, or oh, I only
Or
do
I would do commercial. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
They really pigeonhole themselves, you
yeah. So
know.
it's kind of weird, but I've kind of ended up like him because I do so many different things, and people ask me, "Do you do this? Do you
Yep.
do newborns?" I'm like, or if I say like no, but I'll do it. Like, yeah, like maybe I'm up for the challenge. I mean, for
Yeah.
sure. What's the worst going to happen? It's nothing. It's just a photo. It captures what's there, you know? So, yeah,
Yeah.
but
I had a similar circumstance with a you know, an adult art student who was kind of depressed by the first couple of lessons. And I said, "What's the matter?" And he's like, "Well, I just want to learn how to draw shoes."
hmm,
I'll never forget that. It's like, well, you know how you draw shoes? Like you draw everything else, but you got to kind of draw everything else first. Yeah, you know,
yeah,
include shoes. You just can't draw shoes.
that's true. When I was growing up, like he had me up in his studio and he taught me how to, funny thing is he taught me how to draw houses and barns. So I don't know, maybe that's why I like architecture and I like it. Now that I'm thinking about it, that might be a reason too. Like, I remember he would tell me like, how to make the roof line and how it wasn't roof line, it was never straight, it was kind of sagged, like those old buildings would sag in the
Mhm.
middle. And he would tell me like, the perception of it, the front, the back, and how it goes and leans to the side. And he taught me how to do all the barns and stuff. So, as a kid, I would do a ton of those and just, pictures of this, pictures of
Mhm.
barns and stuff and pictures of houses. And maybe that's why I like kind of like architecture today. Maybe that's kind of why I like a lot of those things. Never thought of it that way, but he was an influencer, I think, to a lot of people that I don't know.
Well, I
I
was just
didn't
going
know
to
that you
ask
knew my
you.
grandfather. I didn't know you
Yeah.
knew who he was, and some people, when I say his name, like I went to some place in South Dartmouth on Horseneck Road, the guy was selling art. I was like, oh, do you know my grandfather? He was like a catalog. I was like, no, who is he? I told him about him. He was like, no. And I was like, surprised. So I was like, not too many people know about him in this area. So when you said you knew him, I was like, oh,
Mm.
that's pretty good. You know what I mean? I like
Well,
to,
I
you
wanted
know,
to know, I mean, did you ever run across any of his other students? Because I mean, it was like, I mean, we're talking private lessons. There was nobody else in the room but the two of us,
yeah, I think
you
Buddy
know.
Sylvia was the only other one that I knew
Mhm.
that he said that he knew my grandfather. And he has so there was an eagle that my grandfather, an eagle, a bald eagle, I guess it's out of
Mhm.
wood, and he hand painted the bald eagle. So he has
Mhm.
a picture of that my grandfather did. There's like a flag behind it. So he does like photography. So I know there's that out there. I think Buddy was a student of his, and he said, your grandfather taught me some things. And
Did Buddy have? Did they do? What was he? The focus of a newspaper article where he mentioned Mal? Because
I'm
I'm
not,
thinking back, and it could have been in the Dartmouth Chronicle where there was you know, some young person, you know, up and coming artist, and they spoke about him. about Mal, because I was just sort of curious. I don't know if he did it as a regular thing to take in students.
I know he did. He did teach. I know he definitely did teach. And the problem is, my grandfather, when he taught was probably in the, who knows, like maybe I'm guessing just because of his age, anywhere from the 40s through 70s. So trying to find people that will maybe alive or know or understand versus me, I was born in 81. It's a little bit different. Um, you know, they might have taken lessons through him, but never took it to that next level. Like, I mean, I just never, it's, so between you and the other buddy, that's the only people that I've known so far that actually have had contact with my grandfather and that's taken like as students. And, I look at his work and I see that, I guess the Louis Sylvia and all them, like they just had their own style too. And they captured the whaling era pretty good, like the ships and all the other stuff, like pretty well. But then, my grandfather did a lot of scenery. I think it was Vermont and definitely New Hampshire, of like the old mills and the wheels and the bridges, the covered bridges and stuff like that. He did a ton of work like that. So, trying to find his actual is the details and trying to find people that actually know him. It's been tough. It's been very, very tough. My uncles obviously knows, and his daughter, my aunt Pat, obviously knows, but they don't know what the work is. So they know what he's done, but to try to find his work has been it's been very difficult.
Well, stop and think about it. If he sold a lot while he was alive, it went into people's houses, obviously. Now, of those people that had his work, did they have one or two pieces? Do they have many of his pieces? Because some people are like that. I mean, they like it's like candy. They get stuck on one artist, and they like collecting that, especially as prolific and as widespread he is, because he did a lot. The term back then was motifs, still life motifs. Old tumble down buildings motifs, the Bell Book and Candle motifs. All those things. And there's some romantic notions to a lot of those things, like the old barn, and there's that romanticism in there. But those people have passed on. So the work either gets passed on to family members, gets sold off in an estate sale, and sometimes that stuff ends up at auction and it starts the cycle all over again. Trying to trace him through the auctions is probably, I think Dr. Richard Connor, I've mentioned him a million times in the show. He's been on the show a couple of times, at least I think. I know I've written a couple of articles on him or with him about, him being the professional resource. And he I think he said, I think every artist should get their work into an auction. Just get the work out there to the auction. You're all still alive. They know who you are. There's all the documentation. Now they've got a guideline. They've got a measuring stick. So if anything comes up in the future, there you go. So let's put out a plea, because I mean, we just never know who listens to the show. There was an artist that I literally bumped into his work. It was kind of hard to miss it. I mean, the stuff, it was huge. It was at Bridgewater State University. His name was Jack Wolf. The painting was of these Black people sitting on a stoop in Roxbury. And the way he painted them, they were more expressionistic, but yet the characters of these people were very, very evident. And I thought he was a Black artist, and an African American artist. So I did a bit more research, and I interviewed his wife on the podcast. And long story short, his work is being resurrected, part and parcel because of his son-in-law and his daughter. But a woman in California heard the podcast, and that was pretty much what, you know,
Started. Yeah.
started it. And there's a show. He's having a show. You
Nice.
know, well, oh, there's a show, a retrospective show of his. So he's coming back up, and I think that would be a great legacy for me for the podcast. You know, we are working now in collaboration. We haven't announced it yet. It's been crazy. It's been crazy busy, but we've been working in collaboration with the New Bedford Whaling Museum's Common Ground project for an exhibit that's going to be coming up in 2023 at this point. They were collecting stories on people, you know, all backgrounds, all subject matter, so on and so forth. But what they're doing is they're digitizing all of the podcasts that we've done to this point, and all of them that we're going to be doing going up the line. We're just going to try to keep this going. So that means, for example, that your great grandchildren will be able to see Mal's work as well as yours.
Yeah.
You know, in this database. One of the things about the database is to start connecting dots. We're going to start identifying those dots. And I just remembered there was another Portuguese artist. He had a studio downtown. I think his name was Joe Souza.
Yeah, that was my grandfather's really here, but they were like best buds. I remember going
So
to Joe Souza's house. They had a huge garden together. I'm pretty sure he lived on Russell's Mills Road.
yeah,
Joe Souza. Yeah. I
yeah,
went to his I went to
yeah. I mean, this guy was another prolific guy. I mean, he made a living being an artist. So
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody. I mean, Carl Simmons. You know, I mentioned him on like almost every other show. You know, we got to get him down there because this young guy really, he's a history junkie. And he's always looking. He's like a prospector. He's always panning for gold or something like that. And there's got to be something about the Luso-American community with the amount of visual artists that have been produced. I don't know so much about the French Canadian
Yeah.
community,
It's just,
but
it's really tough because nowadays it's like for me to fit in with a bunch of photographers, it's like, wow, it's so difficult to just stand out, or it's so difficult to be known for
Mhm.
that matter. Where back when he was there and he was just such a damn good painter that his presence was known. He was known. So, if anyone knows information or anyone has work or come across something and maybe say, oh, I knew who Mallet was. I sold one of his things or I got rid of it. Or,
Mhm.
it'd be kind of cool just to hear. And if someone actually knows some things and, it's been tough. I do know the Whaling Museum does have one of his pieces. They have a vase, as you would put it.
Yeah, definitely. They're
With
not gonna get and be buying any vases.
no, but he has a piece that he donated to them. They have it.
Yeah.
They have it. I seen it in their catalog. They have it in their database. So they do have something. I don't think it's out though. I didn't see it out, but they do have it. I saw it on there. They did catalog it. I'm not. I think it has something to do with the bird. I don't know if it was like a state bird, but he had it on. He had it on there, and it was pretty
Mhm.
intricate. The way he did stuff. But yeah, I think it would be great if someone could come forward that has something, or a past student, or someone that who knows that might have something. It's tough, and it's tough to try to find like this you know the Azorian people who did paintings. Like there was a whole group of them that did it. There was like the Portuguese American, like the art club or whatever they did. There was one in
Mhm.
Westport too. They all got into, and he was also I don't know. I'm trying to think of I don't know if it's in the western part of the state, but there was another art studio club that he belonged to, and they all got together. So, the Sylvia, Louis Sylvia, he's pretty
Mhm.
easy to find, around here. But yeah, it's been tough to find Mal's work. And I
Yeah,
try to say Mal, his name's Manuel, and they're like, "What's Mal?" I'm like,
that's just what he went by. Yeah,
that's what he did. Yeah,
it's
so it's
probably
tough.
an Americanization of Manal, because
Yeah,
Manal was a more of a sobriquet, a nickname. The Portuguese love to jam up names like Joaquin would just be
yeah,
Key. They just
yeah.
shorten it to Key, or José would just be that. So
I guess
Manal,
when you were island talk was a lot different than mainland. So
yeah, that's We're gonna wrap this up. I can't believe this time flew by so fast. This is fascinating. Yeah. Let's just put it out there, and I'm hoping that too. I did Boston Maki too on his great great uncle Nicholas Yolenti, and I'm hoping that between the two of you, the stories of the two of you, that we'll be able to grab more people out. Because look, as long as you're around to remember him, he still stays alive.
Yeah,
You know.
I'll tell you this. Okay, so I was, I think I was 20 years old, and at the time he had a girlfriend, and he was living in Fairhaven with her, and so I picked him up, and we went for a drive, and we went out to Duval's, and we went out, to the landing and all that stuff, and then I talked to him and I said, I want to learn how to make kale soup. I mean, this is my last meal. Kale soup is my last meal. My grandfather was not only an artist, but he was the best cook. Anything he made, he would take a can of beans and make it into a gourmet meal. Like it was just a can of beans, but he always add different things to it. So I talked to him and I said, I want to learn how to make kale soup. So we did. We made kale soup. I took down the ingredients, and there's another thing about him too. He had like 12 different ways of making kale soup. So, but the one way I liked it was the way he taught me. And it was like 5 ingredients and that's it. So I have that and I make it. It takes me about 12 hours minimum. It's always good the next day. But when it's done, the only way I know it's done is by smell. And every time I smell that, it's him.
Yeah.
So I'm going to teach my children that, and they're going to keep going on. So even though maybe I couldn't paint like him and I can't teach that, but I sat with him, and it was like probably that's one of the top 3 best things I've ever done in my life. To sit down with him and actually learn something. And then when you redo this every single time, it's like you relive him. You relive what it was. And it's just till this day. And I make kale soup, and I make huge pans of it, and I give it to a bunch of people and friends and family. And it's like I'm spreading my grandfather to everybody else that eats it. And everybody else has loved it. They've never, of course, I was like, well, it's not me, it's him, and it's so that, just something like that has always stuck with me. And anyone on this podcast that's listening, get all of your grandparents, your mother, whoever it is. And if there's something that from your childhood, something that you've loved, learn it. Learn it. It's the best feeling, the best thing you can do. So even if we don't come out with, maybe not too many people know my grandfather, they find the stuff. If I can spread something like that to somebody, do that with your grandfather or your mother. Just do something like that. Because that if you can't find something, that lives through you, that lives through your children, lives through your grandkids. Just keep going. Just do that, especially nowadays with technology. Learn something.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Who knows? Who knows how we affect others, and that's what it's all about. That's the whole perpetuity of things. Wow, this has been great, Michael. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate it. The hard part now is for you to fill out that form with all that, as much as you can get and as many images as you can, because that's really, really important. But I don't know. This started off as a simple enough idea, and wow, it's easy. It was easier doing this podcast when it was just about you. But we have this other person in the room with us that we can't see. I'm lucky that I knew him, and I can't imagine if it was somebody that I never met. It would be a different experience. It would be a different experience. Well, I'm going to wrap this up. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Well,
Thank
folks, we're wrapping up another episode of the In Focus podcast. This one was about MAL Oliveira, he was a well-known painter in his lifetime. He was, as Michael said, a Renaissance man. One of the people that's responsible for me being who I am as a painter. He's still floating around in my head every time I paint. And with that in mind, we'll see you next week. And thanks so much for listening. And thank you, Heavenly Spirits Importers, for being our sponsor. And see you next time. Bye-bye.
We'll see you next week for another episode of the South Coast Artist Index podcast. The South Coast Artist Index podcast is brought to you in part by Heavenly Spirits, who invites you to celebrate the art of life and creative communities everywhere. Learn more at heavenlyspirits.com. To learn more about the South Coast Artist Index, visit theartistindex.com. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. Be the artist you believe you are, and let's take care of each other out there.